Hello, everyone. My name is Hauwa, and I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. So my project, the resort I designed, I call it the GIDAN Hausa Resort and Cultural Center, which basically translates as Hausa House. So the resort and cultural center aims to capture, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Hauwa, for those who I haven't met before. I'm studying architecture at Pennsylvania State University and about to start my 5th year. So I'll go ahead with the presentation. So the Resort and Cultural Center aims to capture the essence of Hausa culture at a glance and give the visitor an immersive experience at one location, so that even if this is the only place they had a chance to visit while in Kanu, where the resort is located, they would have, sort of a holistic sense of what it's like to be a part of Hausa culture. So for this project, I drew inspiration from the layout of a typical Hausa city, and even more specifically from the layout of the Emir's Palace here in Kanu, which Hausa cities are like a lot of other cities in African culture. They're designed to as gated communities with walls and very inward looking spaces. So the resort has been laid out as a mini-gated city that captures various activities which highlight Hausa culture and architecture. So going through my 15 elements for aesthetics and forms, even though, like we've talked about before, Hausa architecture is classified or is recognized by its flat roofs, but this is also depending on the location. Sometimes you would have flat roofs, sometimes you would have domed roofs. But for this location, since I am located in Kanu, which has relatively low rainfalls, I decided to go with flat roofs. And then another aesthetic element is the zankwaye, which are these pinnacles you see in the illustration here. These pinnacles have come to be a symbol of Hausa architecture, which it is often described that without these pinnacles, it is as if a house is an elephant without its horns, or a bull without its horns. And another aesthetic element I incorporated was ornamentation and engraving, which is very common in Hausa architecture, and it can be very ornate depending on the scale or purpose of the building. For materials and sustainability, Hausa architecture is commonly constructed using tubali or these conical shaped earthen blocks. So for my project, I decided to use compressed earth bricks, also incorporate the use of timber or azarat, as it is known in Hausa. And for sustainability, through the layout of the resort, I wanted to, incorporate passive cooling and ventilation techniques, which is very important for the climate where the resort is located. So for the culture and lifestyle elements, I included a courtyard. Like we've discussed, the courtyard is very significant, particularly so in Hausa architecture, because it is important for maintenance of privacy and seclusion of genders, which is one of the key considerations in any form of Hausa architecture, whether it's residential, public, or palatial. For my museum or cultural highlight, I wanted to highlight the Durbar Festival, which is a festival that happens twice a year in most northern states in Nigeria, and it happens during the Eid celebrations, which happen twice a year, and they highlight, this very colorful and decorated horsemen and the emirs of the various emirates or kingdoms throughout the Hausa land, and they come sort of like a parade, and they parade through the city basically. But if you're visiting any Hausa city and you're visiting outside those times, you rarely get the chance to experience that. So as part of my resort, I wanted to include that as in a very scaled down version of it, so that people visiting any time of the year get to experience that cultural aspect, which is basically one of the highlights of Hausa culture. Also, at a smaller scale, I wanted to include, traditional spas, which are very important to especially women, but also men, which is like more of a domestic aspect of the culture. So for process and costs, like I said, I want to incorporate the use of compressed earth bricks, which for the earth would be sourced locally, and to engage the community and local artisans who are versed in this type of building technologies. So for the spirituality and philosophy, a big part of Hausa culture is having, inward private spaces for social gatherings. And like I mentioned, the secluded and gendered spaces are very important in Hausa architecture, because as nowadays, the spirituality is mainly guided or predominantly guided by Islam. So there's that need to separate the genders from intermingling, and as well as inclusion of prayer spaces, which is an important part of everyday life for people of, all faiths. So for my precedent studies, I just looked largely at images that depicts, what a traditional Hausa city look like. So here is an aerial view of Kanu city, and you can see a lot of courtyards, a lot of high walls. You can even spot the zankwai or pinnacles from here, and you can get a sense from this image that Hausa architecture is designed to really be inward looking, to focus on the activities of the people within, and to keep away as much as possible sort of outward stares, or people don't want to be seen from the outside. And the second image is also showing a slight variation of Hausa architecture from Niger, where some Hausa people also reside. And the third image is the picture of the Emirs Palace gate, which, like I said, I drew a lot of inspiration from this, specifically at the grandeur of the gate, and not just the gate, but the palace as a whole. So from my contemporary or modern precedents, I was looking a lot at the work of Mariama Kamara, who does work in Niger with, she takes local materials, local knowledge and techniques, and really the traditional architecture, which is also very heavily inspired by Hausa architecture, and translates it in a modern form. And what I like most about her work is that she really incorporates traditional local materials that are suitable for the climate, that is, that the local people have expertise in. So you're not just importing new materials or foreign materials that are not suitable for our climate. And through my research, I found a lot of similarities between Hausa architecture and Arabian or desert architecture. And since they have, in terms of resort architecture, there's a much better established language in that, and because there's a lot of similarities even in terms of the culture and the climate, I was looking a lot to that for inspiration. So these are some resorts I found which I thought have a similar architectural language that I was trying to portray. So these are just my sketches, sorry, as I went through the process. So like I said, I was trying to highlight or create sort of a mini Hausa city at a glance for the visitor. And so I laid it out, the main part of the resort, I laid it out as, a sort of a typical neighborhood or Hausa, not a typical neighborhood. I laid it out to depict a Hausa neighborhood or street. So you can see like the different houses with the different facades and created this sort of courtyard or hallway here, which is inward looking. So it creates privacy for the visitors. I also wanted to incorporate a lot of cultural traditional elements in terms of what the user or the visitor experiences. So creating like a sense of family. So like with the kitchen and the restaurant, creating the space where you can, if you choose to, sit on the floor and have this experience of what it means like to eat as part of a family. Like the houses would typically sit down on the floor and share from. So I was saying part of the typical house experience, children part of the same family would typically sit around and eat from a common plate. So I wanted to also give the user that experience. So these are just my sketches going through the design process. So for my mood board, I wanted to really highlight typical features of traditional architecture in terms of both the features and the palette, the material palette and the culture and the color as well. And like I said, I wanted to also incorporate the cultural elements such as the Durbar festivals, the courtyards, which you can see some modern examples of here. And because Kanu generally or Hausa land generally is typically very hot, I wanted to also create this interior cool space where people can, even though you're in a hot climate, you can find some greenery and relax and have this sort of cool indoor, semi-indoor, outdoor experience. So going to my floor plan, or this is more of a site plan. Starting here, I have the entry gate and security post, which is, sort of the grand entrance gate where visitors would first approach the building and be guided by the security and sort of all that that process. And moving in is like I created this procession that goes all the way from the gate all the way towards the back of the resort. So moving in on the left and right, I have gardens and event spaces. So this would be both indoor and outdoor event spaces. And I organized the program such a way that privacy increases as you go from the main gate inwards. So the space is both accessible to residents who are like staying in at the resort or just everyday visitors who might want to come and use the other facilities at the resort, such as just to visit the restaurant or to go to the spa. So if you're a visitor, you come in, if you're just going to either the spa or the restaurant, you would be guided, at the first entrance. And then through that is like the grand reception. So if you're a long-term visitor or a staying visitor, you would find the reception there where you would be, book your room or make further inquiries, or if you want to just be guided into the resort. And then on the other side of the reception, I have the museum or the gift shop. And then 6 are the guest villas. And so I designed 2 different types of villas. So I have the general villas, which have more rooms and for like multiple families or multiple guests. And then further in, I have like private family villas, which, could be rented out by a whole family. And then at the back, which is the most private part of the resort, is of course, the service quarters. So the way I included the procession, like the processional hallway, because I wanted that to be where the Durbar takes place. So they would come from the back and, proceed all the way through the front of the resort. And, guests can either, there would be viewing platforms above the museum, or guests could just come out and look and observe the Durbar from their residences. So this is a zoomed in view of the plan. So this is one of the general, the larger residential villas. So I have the Zaure on the outside, where maybe if some service is being provided, they wouldn't want to immediately go into the inner quarters of the guests, so they couldn't be announced there or wait to be escorted into the building. And then I have the courtyard in the middle, and then the courtyard is surrounded by guest rooms, and then there is a lounge area at the back. So these are just some rendered collages showing the different views of the resort. So this is the main gate, or the front facade, where you would first approach the resort. This is one of the guest villas. So this is the front view of one of the guest villas. This is showing the interior courtyard of, again, one of the guest villas, and showing this is one for the private guests for the private villas, and has a pool so that guests can, enjoy their privacy while they're swimming or just enjoying the weather outside. So that is it for my presentation, and I just want to take a minute to say thank you, especially to Madili. These 10 weeks went by really fast, and I've made truly invaluable connections here and gained incredible insight from the distinguished professors and experts in various fields of Afrocentric architecture, as well as from my colleagues, the other interns. And I just want to say, I hope these connections that I've made, or that we've made over these past 10 weeks, stay with me and stay with us throughout the rest of our careers as we continue to explore and delve into African-centered design. Thank you.